Is this what it's always?
I have no idea how it's a dodo.
Oh, yeah.
If
Okay.
or we don't
So we're gonna get. We're not gonna start early. Sorry. Okay.
Well, I pulled up the app and then I realized that I don't remember my login. But so long since I've used it, I'm like, did I log in with my phone number or email and my phone?
Thank you all for being here. We're gonna start in a couple minutes. You know, it's very out parking signs. So.
Anyone in my chat or anything?
Steve Hunnick, I'm with the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and Dakota. And of course, we're here on Hillel space in this beautiful campus presence of this very important Jewish organization here. I'm going to say a couple words. This is a student center at University of Minnesota Center event. Benji was here. Benji, and thank you everyone. Thank you press for coming today. Relatively short notice. Thank you to all of our wonderful students, Abby, and the entire Hillel staff, and all of my JCRC colleagues for working so hard today. I just want to say a few things preliminarily. First of all, this is day 203. It's been 203 days since the mass terrorism of October 7th. That means 203 days of hostage holdings. The hostages close to them. Second of all, Shabbat, so Shabbat Shalom, it's Pesach, so thanks to that for Pesach, and we keep all this in mind. One thing from the community's perspective is how very important the university is to the Minnesota Jewish community and beyond. It is really, in many respects, particularly after the war, when most of the vestiges of discrimination ended on this campus, the upward engine of mobility for the Jewish community. Deep affection for the University of Minnesota. 4 generations of University of Minnesota graduates in my family, starting with my grandmother in 1829, excuse me, Gladys Dover, library science. So that shows you something about the depth of our connection with this university. And also at this moment, when I credit the university president of Missouri, I would maintain calm, working hard to maintain calm in this campus, so that the university can maintain and continue its educational mission. Of course, and that's why we're here today. This is in the heat of excitement by some demonstrators, in word, deed, and sign. Things you'll see, the things that you will hear from both our students up here and from Sammy a little more in detail. So with that, let's keep all this in context. Let's keep all this in perspective. I also want to note that just today, as I understand it, a documentary made by Sheryl Sandberg called Silence Before Screams about the mass sexual predation of Hamas on October 7th is being released, or at least the trailer is coming out. Maybe that's over the weekend, so please, members of the press, keep that in mind too. And again, thank you for coming today. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to literally the 18 after Okay, thanks, Deb.
Thank you for being here today. My name is Abby Kirschbaum, and I'm the Assistant Director at Minnesota Hillel. On October 7th, campus groups across the country celebrated the single deadliest day in Jewish history since the Holocaust, referring to the day as resistance. The eliminationist rhetoric being spewed on campus since then has been toxic and often feels unsafe. The messages our students have experienced around campus, in the classroom, and on social media have marginalized, demonized, and silenced the majority of Jewish voices and isolated and targeted Jewish students. Student groups, faculty, and even off-campus actors are entitled to free speech and academic freedom within the university rules and the city and state laws, but allowing these actors to normalize the idea that October 7th was anything other than an act of terror is further marginalizing Jewish voices and dividing our campus. Hillel is thankful for the JCRC support in advocating for our students, and for each of you for making the time to be here today. I would now like to introduce 3 of our amazing students here at Hillel to share their stories. Curly?
My name is Carly Sachs, and I'm a junior at the University of Minnesota. Earlier this week, I walked past the die-in in the Kaufman Student Union. As I stepped into the union, I had to walk past chalking that read, "Death to Zionism." I identify as a Zionist for many reasons, but above all, I do because I believe that the state of Israel has a right to exist as a homeland for the Jewish people. Like most Jews, my Zionist identity is deeply intertwined with my Jewish identity. Seeing "Death to Zionism" as I'm walking to class feels as though the protesters on my campus want my Judaism to cease to exist. They want me to cease to exist. It genuinely makes my skin crawl. This wasn't the worst of it, though. If you know what the Intifadas were, could you imagine being a Jewish student hearing an agitated mob on your campus chant, "Globalize the Intifada," or as I hear it, "Globalize the killing of all Jews"? When the activists on campuses glorify October 7th, I feel pained to see how proud they are that my people were massacred. Jewish students are not celebrating the destruction in Gaza. There are no smiles on our faces or cheers for the death of Palestinians. Watching some of these activists smile during their die-in as they chant about death to Israel and Zionism feels terrible. Their demands are not for peace, regardless of their ceasefire claims. They are for more hate, violence, and disruption. I hold on to hope that as the activists on campus chant, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," that they actually want a peaceful resolution to the decades-old conflict that doesn't require the death of over 7 million Jews living in Israel. However, their demands do not feel or sound peaceful. They seem hateful, disruptive, and call for the elimination of half the world's Jewish population. I am honored to attend a university that continually strives to address hate in all of its evolving forms. However, there is still work to be done. Thank you.
Carly, would you mind spelling your name for us, first
Sure.
and last, please?
CarlibSachs.
Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Ethan Fine, and I'm a senior here at the U. Thank you all for being here, and before I start, I just want to say, let our people go and free the hostages. So many Jewish students on this campus have felt the need to fly under the radar over the last 6 months, often hiding any outward signs of their identity. Most just want to get home or go to class without confronting any protests. But now we must confront this in the classroom as well. Israel has been a topic of discussion in every single class I've had this week, including classes that have nothing to do with this conflict. On top of that, some professors have canceled classes and urged students to attend these protests, which I find infuriating. In November, I spoke with the university administration about the same issues we see now: protests with hateful chanting and signage. I was told that because there was no imminent threat to student safety, they would take no action. Does this administration really have to wait for Jewish students to feel an imminent threat to our safety for something to be done? Is calling for the globalization of the Intifada, the violent uprising against Jews, not the threat? I'm concerned about the university not taking action until it is too late, whatever that may mean. This lack of action at our university and others across the country is a failure of the higher education system. A failure not only to protect our students, but to educate them on such nuanced and complex ideas. I have seen Jewish students at universities across the country physically threatened, harmed, and I have friends who have been asked not to return to their campuses until it is safe for Jewish students. I fear that what is happening on our campus is now a warning sign that we are on the road to the same campus climate here. Let our people go, free the hostages. Thank you so much for being here.
Can you spell your name too for us, please?
Yes, first name Ethan, E-T-H-A-N, last name Fine, F as in Frank, I-N-E. Thank you.
I'm Alex Stewart, a junior at the U and the current Minnesota Hillel student president. Because of my role at Hillel, I've had several high school seniors reaching out to me asking if they should still come to the U in the fall because of what they've seen on social media. Sadly, I have not been able to give them an easy answer. On one hand, seeing some of the hateful chalkings on campus makes me feel scared. Yet, on the other hand, I don't want to scare them away because we have a strong Jewish community that has been essential to my college experience, especially in times like these. There's a reason Minnesota Hillel is proudly one of the best places in the country for Jewish students. With over 50,000 students on campus, I worry that recent media coverage that only focuses on the few hundred camped in front of the Union, many of whom are not students, is making prospective Jewish students deem this place unsafe. We are lucky that, unlike other campuses, we have not seen anti-Jewish violence yet. However, I, like many students, fear that the extremist rhetoric could at any moment become real violence. Sometimes I feel like things are not really that bad here because other campuses have it worse. But I'm not okay. Walking on campus, listening to people say that they want a global intifada and death to Zionism is not okay. This week has been hard and disgusting and depressing and horrifying. These things I see on campus, on the sidewalk, and the walls of the Union make me feel uneasy. I'm a college junior. I volunteer in my community, I have a job, and I have finals next week. I should not have to also spend hours explaining to people that safety in this moment is relative. And I should not have to spend hours wondering if it is safe for me to be on campus. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sami Rachamim, S-A-M-I-R-A-H-A-M-I-M. I'm Director of Communications and Community Affairs for JCRC, Jewish Community Relations Council, Minnesota and the Dakotas. And I graduated from the University of Minnesota 2018 and was an active student leader here at Hillel during my time as a student. You just heard some true and difficult stories from Jewish students. These protests are fostering a climate of hatred, division, and fear. Every person you see up here wishes the war in Gaza was never necessary. We wish Hamas would have returned our hostages and would have surrendered from power a long time ago. We agonize for the loss of innocent lives in Gaza and wish to see the humanitarian crisis end immediately. We yearn for a day when Israelis and Palestinians each have their needs of peace, justice, and dignity and security met. But the ideas animating these campus protests are not about peace and reconciliation for Israelis and Palestinians. Each of these protests begins with the infamous chant, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." This chant means the destruction of Israel. Why do we think that? Because Hamas tells us that is exactly what they mean.
فلسطين من نهرها إلى بحرها من شمالها إلى جنوبها أرضنا وحقنا ووطننا لا تنازل ولا تفريط بأي شبر أو جزء منها. لا يمكن أن نعترف بشرعية احتلال إسرائيل لها. لا شرعية للاحتلال وبالتالي لا شرعية لإسرائيل.
We call this press conference because we are appalled that some in the local and national media are covering the demonstrations on this and other campuses as anti-war or calling for peace. How do you square that with the fact that these protests are using the same language and imagery that we would see at a Hamas rally? We're going to look at some of the images and messages that have been spread on campus this week alone. This is a photo appeared in the Star Tribune this week from the protest on Tuesday. The sign says, "Intifada is revolution, is armed struggle, glory to the resistance." Few of the students have already mentioned this word, intifada. But just to be clear, what does this word mean? This word brings up memories of a Palestinian terror campaign that killed roughly 1,000 Israeli civilians in the early 2000s, mainly in suicide bombings, attacks on public transportation, in cafes, at a Passover Seder. October 7 was the deadliest and darkest day for Jews since the Holocaust. Israeli civilians were murdered, raped, kidnapped from their homes. Over 130 are still being held underground by Hamas terrorists. Intifada is the same thing as October 7, just over a period of years instead of all packed into one day. This is what armed struggle looks like to the Palestinians who rule Gaza. Glory to the resistance. Hamas is actually an acronym. It stands for, in translation, Islamic Resistance Movement. Glory to the resistance means glory to Hamas. This is a pro-terror message. Why is the media not taking this seriously? There's been lots of imagery on the campus since October 7, this week, glorifying the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the PFLP, designated as a terrorist organization by the US, Canada, Japan, other countries. Photo here advertising a Marxist-Leninist perspective on campus in Palestine, victory to the resistance. Layla Khalid, infamous airplane hijacker in 1969 and 70, glorified by the students as a hero. SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine Instagram, they are celebrating this event, chalking of the terrorists on the campus, the flag of a terror organization flying in front of Kaufman Union. Al-Qassam brigades make us proud. Al-Qassam is the military wing of Hamas. This is also a message glorifying terrorists. Zionist, F off. A Zionist is simply a person who believes Israel has a right to exist. Through a variety of polls, we can extrapolate that at least 85% of American Jews identify as Zionists. This message speaks for itself. Al-Aqsa flood is what Hamas calls their October 7 massacre of Jews, glorified in chalk on the U of M campus. These flyers have been all over Minneapolis. Nothing but hate for Israel and Zionism. From Gaza to the Americas, decolonization means attack. It is time to take this rhetoric seriously and stop reporting it as a pro-peace message. And finally, death to America. As noted in our press statement, the Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran has voiced support for the student protests sweeping the country. So we see that symbiosis here as well, given that death to America is a popular slogan among supporters of the Iranian regime. In conclusion, the ideas animating these protests are built on an extreme, maximalist vision to destroy Israel, the world's only Jewish state. We are asking you to see the connection between this rhetoric and the fact that Jewish students make up 1% of the undergraduate student body, but as reported in the Star Tribune, account for 1 in 3 of all bias incidents at the university this year. Anti-Jewish incidents, those are. We call on the media to ask these protesters, question them. What do they mean when they chant, resistance is justified when people are occupied? Do they believe that the Israeli communities invaded on October 7, which are inside Israel's sovereign territory, not the disputed West Bank, but inside Israel's sovereign territory, do they believe those families are occupiers of Palestinian land? Does that mean that murder, rape, and kidnapping is as they say, justified? If they answer yes, will you still call them anti-war and pro-peace? If they answer no, will you ask them, well, what does glory to the resistance actually mean? If it's not glory to Hamas, and they truly are anti-war, why is all of their ire directed at Israel? Not a word toward Hamas, who could end the war, end the suffering, end the humanitarian crisis tomorrow, today, by releasing the hostages. Ask these questions. There is something deeply rotten in this movement. And it's time for journalists to start asking the hard questions and tell the full story of what these anti-peace, pro-terror protests are really about. Thank you. And I would be remiss to not now invite you to ask your hardest questions. So
Can you
please.
spell your name again?
Yes, it's that's an easy one. Sami, S-A-M-I, Rachamim, R-A-H-A-M as in Minnesota, I-M as in Minnesota.
Could we also ask the first two speakers?
Yeah.
And I think Alex to spell your name.
That's good.
Yeah. Abby Kirschbaum, A-B-B-Y-K-I-R-S-H-B-A-U-M.
Carly Sachs, C-A-R-L-I-E-S-A-C-H-S.
Steve and Alex.
Want Alex?
Yeah, I think that's perfect.
Alex Stewart, A-L-E-X, Stewart, S-T-E-W-A-R-T.
When did the signs and all this stuff, and when was this first noticed? When did this start showing up? Is this all just in the recent weeks, or has this been going on for a while?
There have been celebrations of the October 7 massacre on this campus dating to October 8th. These images are mostly taken from this past week.
I can find out.
No, but you've seen it, a lot of this intensifying since this.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The protest this week, the encampment, right, all part of a inspiration from the protest centered at Columbia and on other campuses, all part of this movement that is, it's not just rotten here, it's rotten in all of these places where it's cropped up.
And across Minnesota, I work with campuses across Minnesota as well. I work with Jewish students on campuses across Minnesota. I get pictures from them all the time since October 8th of the same posters, the same scared students and students who are fighting with their roommates, students who are not being able to communicate with their faculty members, students who are not able to or who are being accused of retaliation or afraid of retaliation from teachers, professors, Israeli students, Jewish students, all over Minnesota.
Has anyone from your group or any other Jewish students in a wider community attempted to have conversations with some of these protesters and explain what you've explained here today? Or is it something you just don't feel comfortable with?
Yeah.
So the first thing to know about the toxic nature of Israel-Palestine discourse on college campuses, not just here, is something called anti-normalization. This is a doctrine issued by the National Students for Justice in Palestine movement that instructs all of their campus chapters to refrain from any engagement with Israeli or Zionist, mainstream Jewish voices. So when I was a student, I had that same idea. Let's have a conversation. Let's learn each other's stories. We are both connected to this place. We both have a lot of pain over the fact that this conflict is still tearing our peoples apart. Let's have a conversation. Just a basic conversation between students. And because of this policy, this doctrine, there is a wall that is self-inflicted, self-erected by the Students for Justice in Palestine and their supporters to isolate and place Jewish students outside the community of the good, just write them off as so evil and untrustworthy, and that the conversation isn't even possible. It's heartbreaking.
So biannually, Minnesota Hillel offers a trip to 5 Jewish students and 25 non-Jewish student campus leaders to go to Israel and the Palestinian territories. It's an incredible opportunity that I was fortunate enough to go on last year as a Jewish student leader. And recruiting for that event for the past 3 years, even pre-October 7th, has been a significant challenge. There have been letters sent from advisors to student groups saying, you won't be meeting with these people. They will not pass along your invitation for this experience. And it's truly just a learning experience. And I think that just shows how closed off they've been to conversations in the past.
I'll share one story from this Thanksgiving at a different campus, not here. There was an interfaith Thanksgiving that students decided not to come to because Hillel was there. Just Thanksgiving.
What have the conversations been like with administration at the university with these concerns, and what do you think their appropriate response should be?
University is a larger institution, right? And there are certainly pockets of difficulty. Gender, women, and sexuality studies posted it October 7 mass rape denial, essentially. I'm not sure it's been removed or not, but that was certainly the source of a lot of consternation, as well as a complaint that's been made against the university. Other pockets of difficulty too. As I said before, I think overall, there's been a certain amount of calm on campus, but as you can hear from the students, you can see with your own eyes, a lot of difficulties. And two, we did meet with acting president, interim president Ettinger, and others in the administration back in October or November, brought forth our issues. They heard us. They certainly heard us at that time. There's been some movement. I think there should be more. The university could speak with its very loud and clarion voice about these messages that these students are hearing, and acknowledge the situation our Jewish students are facing. That would be critically important.
What do you think the appropriate response they should do now that there's this group on campus and these things showing up? What would you expect?
The university, of course, acknowledged the importance of First Amendment rights on campus, but simultaneously the danger of the levels of incitement. Where will this go? When you're comparing Zionism to genocide, right? I mean, you can't think of anything that's more incendiary, right? Inflammatory than that, putting people at risk. Speak with that voice. This is not acceptable discourse on any college campus. Say what the university presidents testifying before Congress did not say, that there is absolutely no place for this, any place, but particularly any university.
How do you feel about the university's response so far?
I think we should hear from the students. They're living the life every day.
Speaking specifically about the university's response to this these protests, as well as everything we've seen since October 7th. Personally, as a student, I'm very disappointed. I don't feel supported by this academic institution. As I mentioned a little bit earlier on, I spoke with the administration back in November, raising the same concerns that are leveling now. And I was told that nothing could be done, that there wasn't anything that they could do. These were students exercising their rights, and as long as I was not threatened or in any way harmed, it was out of their hands. While I disagree with that and I'm upset with it, I, at the time, accepted it, and I tried to say, this is a university campus, things happen, and I need to go on. 203 days since October 7th, I'm all the more angry, I'm all the more upset, and as a student, it's incredibly hard to go to class every day, sit next to your peers, sit and listen to a faculty member, and even know that just the administration, all of these people you feel like are against you, and you feel not supported in your education. I just want to go to school. I want to go to school, and this is just thrown on my face.
What do you want to see the university do specifically?
Personally, I think that this sort of incitement, this sort of pro-terror protest cannot be allowed on our campus. I think I want to see a condemnation of it. I want to see administration speaking out against students who are speaking out against students, right? I want to see the university responding in a way that tells me and my Jewish and Zionist peers that there is a place for us at the University of Minnesota and that they care for us.
Can you tell us more about what you mentioned earlier, the climate in the classroom specifically? We've seen, obviously, what has been posted outside Kaufman. But you mentioned earlier feeling uncomfortable in class. What specifically have you run into in the classroom?
I would say, notably since Tuesday, professors have canceled classes, urging their students to attend these protests. Professors who have held class have backed their students who have chosen not to go in lieu of going to the protests. And that there's been professors who are very forthright in their support of these protests. And I think as a student, I feel like that is incredibly uncomfortable because I want to just learn in an environment that is conducive to learning. And I don't want to feel as though there's this polarizing attitude. I distinctly remember Tuesday afternoon, around 2 p.m., while the protests were going on outside of Kaufman, sitting in the classroom nearby, and half the class was gone because most of them were supposedly at this protest. And the professor was saying, I almost canceled class because I wanted to go to this protest, but finals are next week. I figured we should have class. And I just felt so alienated and isolated.
Hi, I'm Isabel, Isabelle. You need last name?
Yes.
Last name's Pizzurro, P as in pizza, Izzurro. I'm currently a junior at the University of Minnesota, and I can speak to classroom situations. Just this week, well, as Ethan mentioned earlier, multiple classes, classes that I have been in that are not at all related to Holocaust memory, World War II, current conversations about Israel-Palestine have brought up questions to students about what do you think on this conflict that were uncalled for and disrupted my education on the topics we were supposed to be covering. I find this disheartening because it's disrupting my education and my academic pursuits, and it also singles me out normally as the only Jewish student in my classes. And I feel forced to take a position on this conflict that I may not be prepared for or have prepared in preparation for this class. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
So these aren't kids. What kind of class were you? Is it a math
It's an
class?
art history class.
Art history.
Based
This
on
is
in the
not art-
1500s.
Not art of the.
No, Italy.
How did it even come up in a class like that?
So multiple student, I think it's SJP, but there have been organizations around campus putting up flyers in classrooms, in Blagenhall, multiple of the classrooms have flyers that read anything from get out of your ivory tower and get to the streets. This one was a statement directed at tenured professors asking them to take action in support of Palestine. So as I showed up to my lecture in the morning, or rather my discussion section, the professor, I believe he was well-intentioned and didn't intend to cause any harm to the students, but they saw the flyer and asked the class what our thoughts were on the current conflict and the climate on college campuses. And I think that was inappropriate given the topic of our class that day.
I guess for anybody up here, when you see this, do you think that the students really believe what they're saying, or are they going along with this because it is fashionable? Anybody have?
Yeah, I mean, when someone tells you that someone's committing genocide, you say that's bad. I understand where they're coming from, and they are being used as propaganda for these terrorist organizations. It is incredibly sad to see them being used like this.
I feel sadly for everyone in this situation.
One of the things we often talk about in our dialogues and education sessions around anti-Semitism is that we can't always know. It's often very hard to know what a person's intent is with some certain pieces of language. But what we're here and we're super clear about is what is the impact of those types of language on our community. And we've been saying it over and over again that this language is harmful. It is demonizing Israel and Jewish people who have a connection to Israel, and that's problematic. And that's we're not being listened to in that way. And look, I can understand wanting to protest the humanitarian crisis. It is deeply upsetting. And there are some students that know better. They know that what they're advocating for is a pro-terror, pro-Hamas message. And then there are others who we have to give kind of some benefit of the doubt that they are, swept up. They've watched 3 TikTok reels and they think that they have suddenly understood, all of Middle East history. And so we don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but we know for sure that there are definitely student leaders in this movement that when they say from the river to the sea, they mean the exact same thing that Hamas is putting forward.
Let me just add something here, Sandy. You know what it takes to bring a flag for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine? How do you ever get a flag? And then second, to bring it to a rally, right, an engagement. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. Just as there was a Hezbollah flag at Hennepin Avenue back in October or November. I mean, these are people. I mean, you want to talk about, are they naive? Are they don't know? No. You're talking about people who are terrorists or supporters of terrorists, pardon me, by the fact that they brandish this flag, that they unfurl this flag here on campus or on Hennepin Avenue in Minneapolis. And you talk about a warning sign to democracy. That is it.
Hi, my name is Molly Seligman. That's MOLLY SELIGMAN. For me, the scariest thing as a student is that people do not know what they do not know. And frankly, it is the responsibility of our teachers, our professors, our mentors to teach all of this to us. Minnesota and Wisconsin are the two main feeder states for this school, and neither of which require education on the Holocaust. And that is a problem. Since I started school here as a freshman, and I'm a senior now, every incident I've had of anti-Semitism has never been taken seriously, and that has only become worse this past year. And that is totally unacceptable. And the fact that people are being able to say this rhetoric that they don't even understand, and no one has taken the time to explain it yet, is the part that makes it scary to be a student here right now.
Can you talk about one of those instances of anti-Semitism experience?
Well, the first one was one of my first weeks of school here, and it was met with Hitler jokes about why I shouldn't be here, which isn't acceptable. And those just get worse over time when nothing happens and when people do not require education about that. And that was in a class about diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is unacceptable. And just because Jewish students have privilege in other ways does not mean that they cannot experience hate crimes in ways that harm them and harm their education. And it's important to understand that and to educate on that, to ensure that we can prevent as many future Jewish students from experiencing these atrocities and doing what we can to educate students that likely might not have learned this when they were younger because it is not required. And because of that, when professors bring up this conversation, learn first. Learn the words that you're saying and learn what that means so when you teach it correctly. Because we all want peace. Everyone in this room wants peace. And that has never been something that people have argued about.
Hi, my name is Lila Prass. That's Lylaprass. I'm a sophomore here at the U. And just addressing the question on if students really do know what they're saying or non-student actors know what they're saying at these protests, I think a lot of them know more than we would care to admit. I had an experience last semester where a professor decided to teach about this. And it was the most alienating academic experience I have ever had in my life. This professor taught that Israel was genocidal and an apartheid state, and that Palestinians do not have rights under the laws of Israel. And in that class, that professor, with no warning about what the topic was going to be that day, opened up the class to small group discussion. What do you think about this? And I sat there stunned. And I wear a necklace every day that I got from my bat mitzvah that says my Hebrew name. Me and all my cousins have them for our bat mitzvahs. It's something I haven't taken off since I was 13, and my peer next to me saw that and asked why I was killing her roommate's cousins. That was in November. I never wanted to go back to that class again because I was afraid. I was so uncomfortable, and I was afraid because I was just a 20-year-old white American sitting at the University of Minnesota being accused of killing someone's roommate's cousins. It is really scary to be at the university right now, especially in an academic setting whose job is to educate us, to teach us facts. To be in a class where that was clearly thrown by the wayside. That class also got canceled to go to multiple protests and protests. I feel like my education in that class was sacrificed. And that's not okay. I'm here to learn. I want to learn. I want to go to my classes. I want to feel safe in my classes. I'm lucky that hasn't happened to me again. That's not the case for a lot of my peers. And that should never have happened in the first place. Thank you for being here.
What class did you say that was?
It was a geography class. We had been learning about South America prior to this.
And this happened, when did you say?
In November.
In November, okay, gotcha.
Thank you again for being here.
Hello, everybody. My name is Daniel Lido, DanielLyadov. I want to start off by saying this. Anti-Semitism did not start at the University of Minnesota on October 7th or October 8th. My sister was a student here in 2015, and she has a 10-page document filled with anti-Semitic incidents that have occurred on campus. She tried to bring action with the university and got denied. She tried to bring a Title VII lawsuit. Anti-Semitism has always existed at the University of Minnesota, and thankfully, we've had a strong enough community to at least stay afloat. I also have a message to my fellow Jewish students. We will persevere no matter what amount of hate there is. We will stay together. No amount of hate will make us remove ourselves from the University of Minnesota. And simply, there's always going to be a space for Jewish students here. I wanted to say as well a message to the people that are looking to remove Jewish students off the campus. Have a conversation. Sit down with us and converse. And I think your opinion will be changed. Thank you.
Some of us came from a separate press conference hosted by Karaman where they said a former diversity and equity and inclusion manager was suing over her firing over some social media posts. I'm curious if you all are monitoring this, if you have any thoughts on whether the university has responded appropriately, and if you need some more highlights on the case, we can add that to the question.
I don't know, pardon me, I don't know anything about the case.
She was, the post contained pro-Palestine messages, but also a photo of her standing in front of an Israeli flag that had swastikas painted on it.
That's pretty disgusting. Definitely.
Time for one more.
So the protesters have been calling for a divestment from the university into companies that have a hand in shipping arms. I'm just wondering, like, do y'all have a take on that? Like, what do you think about the divestment efforts from protesters?
Ethan Roberts, I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the JCRC, ETHAN, Roberts, ROBERTS. One of my primary roles at the JCRC is I'm the lead government affairs official. So there's a lot of talk about divestment, state board of investment on college campuses. The goal of the BDS movement is the destruction of Israel. The founders of the movement are very clear, the rhetoric is very clear. And one of the best ways to destroy Israel is to render it vulnerable and unable to protect itself. It's not been that long since Iran, from its sovereign territory, launched over 300 projectiles, including ballistic missiles, which go into space, right? So these are not crude rockets at Israel. How do you think Israel is able to defend itself? It's the companies that these protesters are targeting. Elbit Systems, for example. American companies, right, which provide American jobs. So let's just step back for a second. What have we heard, right? This is a movement which does not believe Israel has a right to exist. If Israel doesn't have a right to exist, then it has no right to defend itself. And if it has no right to defend itself, when it does defend itself, it's obviously committing genocide. So they want to make Israel toxic on campus, and so that you can't defend it and be considered a good person. And they also literally want to make sure that Israel can't defend itself, so that they can carry out that message from Hamas from the river to the sea. So that would be our response. Thank you.
As long as we're having a BDS discussion. I'll add this final point to it. The Arab League announced its boycott of Israel in 1945. That's 3 years before Israel was created. Of course, echoes of Nazism are heard there, right? Going back to when Jewish businesses were boycotted at the beginning of the Third Reich in 1933. Things, of course, got worse after that. But we just think about that, what that means. There was a boycott of Israel before there was an Israel. There was a boycott of the Jewish community pointed toward Palestine. It's called Jew. So you can discern from that what its origins are, and it's deeply anti-Semitic.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you for this. I'm sure some students will be able to stick around to get further questions. Maybe